Let's read the papers. Ukraine needs a new war strategy, US says. That's on the front page of my New York Times. US officials acknowledge that the counter-offensive has fallen short of expectations and say it's time to change tactics. Okay, if the orders are to change tactics, by all means change tactics. Just one comment. I think everyone's supposed to be officially pretending that America is not running this war. I think the New York Times just kind of forgot that that's the game, right? Anyway, the same front page carries an interesting piece on the holiday habits of British people visiting Spain. They excel at drinking too much and spending too little, residents say. Actually, the British can be quite sort of self-deprecating, so I suspect most of them will probably agree with this harsh judgment. Oh yes, righty-ho, that's us to a T. That's what they'll say. Meanwhile, there's a full-page article inside the paper. What can replace China as a global economic engine? I mean, you have to laugh, right? China posts some negative economic news and it's like, okay, we can dismiss a huge chunk of the world with a wave of our hands. Goodbye, China. It's no wonder so many people don't like this paper. Over in the FT, we find an article on who is leading in the IPO business, and it highlights Istanbul. Doesn't mention China. Now, here's the graph that goes with the article. And what do you notice about this graph? Yes, one country seems to be a tiny bit ahead of the others, right? I also have the China Daily here. Now, this paper, it's okay, but it commits the biggest sin in journalism, which is to be rather dull on some occasions, at least. But it is getting better. I've actually cut out and kept several articles from it in the past week or so. So keep raising that standard, guys. Meanwhile, today's New York Times has arrived, and there are 3 articles about Asia on the front page. 2 very negative ones on China, and the third one is on India. India turns moon into showplace for ambition. Successful landing comes at an important moment in the country's global rise. No pretense of being even-handed. China bad, China bad, China bad. India good. That's the message. The South China Morning Post carries a complete non-story about the Hong Kong government possibly planning to arrest a possibly European possible artist. You know, it's the ultimate nothing burger. The Hong Kong government has not arrested this guy or even mentioned him. You know, yet printing this story, it allows the paper to recycle a report about the removal of a sculpture in Hong Kong. And it's a tale which reinforces that fake narrative that there's no free speech in the city anymore. The paper refers to Danish artist Jens Galschiot, who created the Pillar of Shame piece marking the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. The media narrative about this statue, published all over the world, says that this Tiananmen Square statue was removed from display in Hong Kong as the last vestiges of free speech in the city were wiped out. Oh no! But almost nothing in the story is true. To work out that it's not true, all you have to do is a little bit of basic old school journalism. Number 1, go look at the statue. What do you notice? Yeah, it's white folks. Nearly every face on the whole revolting, hideous thing is Caucasian. Possible Chinese faces? Few if any. Why would you create a statue of white people suffering if this commemorates an all-Chinese incident? How many white folk died in Tiananmen Square? Okay, then the second thing an old-school journalist would do is to find out why this is so. We'd research the history of the work, and this is what we find. Galschiot was known for being a, shall we say, left-leaning sculptor. The Pillar of Shame was designed as a statement against inequality. That was his word. Against the inequality of life in the modern capitalist world. It was erected in Rome in 1996 outside a meeting of the United Nations. He then cast several versions of the pillar and placed them in various locations around the world, saying that it generally represented shameful situations which must never reoccur. An identical Pillar of Shame by the same sculptor was erected in Mexico, another one in Brasilia. Still another was announced for a Berlin location. Now, the one in Mexico was put up and then soon removed. I mean, it's not very attractive. The one in Brazil was also erected and then taken away, giving kids nightmares. The one in Berlin was cancelled even before it was erected after some money issues. The only place where the government was patient enough to let their version of the statue remain in the public eye decade after decade was Hong Kong. Now, I'm not talking about British Hong Kong, I'm talking about China-run Hong Kong. The statue was erected in 1997, the year of the handover. So that is the real story, and how different it is to the story the world is told by the newspapers. You can see what the media has done here, right? They've taken an incident in which Hong Kong was the only place in the world patient enough to keep on display for decades a nightmarish statue of white people suffering, and the media turned this story upside down into a weapon with which to attack Hong Kong. Now, I'm not blaming the guy at the South China Morning Post or whoever wrote this. He took the same angle that the highly paid journalists at the big international press bodies took. But what this teaches us is this: it's important. Journalism is important. Digging up the truth is important. Research is important. Going to original sources is very important. Fact-checking, that's important. Being fair is important too. If members of the corporate media choose not to do all this, fine, that's their choice. The rest of us will have to do it. You and me, we are the media now. Peace.